Being from Duke, I had to put on the uniform, change into my uniform today, of a Southern University faculty member. What I want to do is give you just a brief report about what I've been working on the last year to move research forward, and some of the things that are ongoing at the moment, and then some ideas I had for the year ahead and the years that would follow that. And again, what I'm going to try to describe is what TMI is going to be doing as an institution to increase its research efforts. And certainly as professional division members, you're all an important part of that. And part of my job is to work with people who have ideas that they would like to turn into a research study. So I'm here to listen to you, to help you in any way I can throughout the year, not just at the meeting. So I'm going to talk about building towards the future. I just listed, although I don't like bullet point lists, in PowerPoint, but I listed some of the things that I was working on, the main topics. We're trying to establish collegial relationships with other places, like the Institute of Noetic Studies. I have good collaborative relationships with the folks at the Rhine Research Center, and through them to a lot of other places where we're trying to sort of find those partners around the country, around the world, that we can work with in order to further our research. And then I've also been working with individuals, both at Duke and at other institutions, trying to develop enthusiasm and providing support for project ideas. Suggesting ideas to people, trying to give them what they need to get moving with that. But the major accomplishment, I think, since I was here last year, is that we did get the board of directors to approve the implementation of an institutional review board for the protection of subjects in TMI research. So there's several questions I want to touch on in regarding to this. And I think the important questions are, why do we need this? Why does TMI need this? How will it work for those of you who want to do a research project with TMI? And the most important question of all, will this interfere with my plans to actually conduct a study? And I can tell you in advance that we're going to set it up in a way that it's not going to interfere with or slow you down in trying to move forward. The goal of the TMI IRB, like all institutional review boards, is to protect human subjects in our research. This cartoon may be familiar to a lot of you. It was in 1975. I think it was in Playboy. And obviously we see the subject hooked up, probably listening to binaural beats, and the investigator sitting next to him. Now that you're all hooked up, I want you to relax completely. And everybody, when I was back in grad school at UCLA, everybody that I worked with thought this was incredibly funny, but incredibly appropriate, because we did do things like this, and we were asking people to relax. But an interesting, something I think is important is 1975, when this cartoon was published, was really at the very beginning of the idea of protecting the rights of human subjects. Committees were investigating the Tuskegee syphilis study, which had been conducted for decades, where people became outraged at how those subjects in the study were treated by the investigators. These were people who had acquired syphilis on their own, but were followed for decades. And when antibiotics became available, they weren't treated, but they were followed, and more importantly, they were never told that they had syphilis. So at that time and before, there tended to be a very patronizing attitude of physicians and scientists towards mere mortals who they would come across in the course of the studies. And that led to the kind of outrage that I think is represented in this cartoon. We needed to have it done in a different way. So the whole goal, really, again, is that we need to protect human subjects when we ask them to be in our studies. And the first point to make is research involves the collection of information for the purposes of generalizable results. This is sort of a federal government, NIH kind of definition. The point that I think is relevant to us, to all of you, is that if you were to use a program, a Hemi-Sync program, a SAM program with patients, and you wanted to just see how it worked, would this be helpful for this patient? And I know that many of you who treat patients use them in this way, on an individualized basis. That is not research by the definition. IRBs don't get involved in that. It comes to the point where you say, I want to collect information so I can publish it and share the results with the public at large, or the scientific and therapeutic community. At that point, then, it becomes a research study. When a person takes part in a study, there are three principles that guide how they should be treated. And these are just the classics: autonomy, beneficence, and justice. And these were developed in the 70s and are the hallmarks of IRB work. You really have to fully inform. Now, this can affect us in a lot of ways because we need to tell people when we're giving them a program to listen to, the nature of it, the general nature, what we think could be the possible risks, what we think could be the benefits, and what they could expect to happen, how much time they have to commit. And then people, if they don't like it, they can quit at any time. And beneficence just simply means we want to organize things so that the subject, volunteer, gets some benefit. Many times this would only be that they feel satisfaction of their altruistic nature, that they were able to help advance science. But we do try to structure it in a way where it's not just nothing bad for them, but that there's something good. And justice really means that everybody gets an equal chance, so we really don't design studies that exclude women or children or any specific class of people. Everyone gets an equal shot at being in the study. So how is this all going to work for us at TMI? We're going to do reviews of studies that are conducted at TMI or studies with which TMI is deeply involved. In other words, if TMI is sponsoring a study or TMI staff are really involved in the study, then it will be important for the TMI Institutional Review Board to look at the protocol and to look at the consent form. But if you were doing a study at another university or another hospital, then more likely their IRB would be reviewing your protocol. So we really won't be looking at too many projects, at least in the near future. Who will be on the IRB? They will be people who are known to all of us. In the proposal, I suggested that Scooter would, and I'll work with her, to pick volunteers who are willing to serve on this board. And we would like to get a variety of people so that we can get the best coverage. And an application consists of a description of the project you want to do and what you're going to do in it, what your hypotheses and goals are, how you're going to conduct it, and so forth. And then you will need to have a consent form, which is a form that the volunteer signs saying that they've read it and understand it. But more importantly, it is just the documentation of a process where you were explaining fully to the subject what they're getting themselves into. And in each case, we'll have examples on the website of the guidelines, the things you need to include, samples and everything to make it as easy as possible. Plus, I'll be available to help anybody who wants to do a project and needs to go through this review process. We're going to review them. Many of the projects will be reviewed just by me because I'll have an ex officio role as the chairman of this committee, or this board. And unless a study involves more than minimal risk to people who are in it, and of course, I can't think of a study that we would be likely to do that involved more than minimal risk, then it can be given what's called an expedited review just by the chair of the board. So this process should go very quickly. And as I said, we'll be there to help with this all along. And my fear, in a sense, is that people would be suspicious and think that this is only going to cause trouble for them, for you all. And so let me stop at this point, which is what we've done so far, and just make sure that no one has any questions that they would like to ask about this process. Because I'd like to reassure you that we're going to do it in a way that makes it appropriate and easy and efficient for the investigators. Yeah.
So I'm doing a little bit of a study. I have my IRB at UVA.
Right.
When I come down here to TMI, actually UVA is now telling me I have to get consent forms.
From the people here. So Ross is, yeah, go ahead.
Now is that going to be also the case with the TMI's review board?
Well, if you were running a study with TMI participants, as you have been, then we would want to review that protocol. And then we would want those people to sign our consent form. So maybe in that case, there would be review by both institutions. I can assure you that our review will go faster. But again, that would be because you're doing it here. And that really means that the Monroe Institute is significantly involved in the project, especially if you're running participants of a program. Yeah.
Jim, again, which federal agency is responsible for this?
They're federal regulations, and that apply really to all the federal institutions, agencies, departments that would run human subject research. So it applies everywhere. The major focus is usually the National Institutes of Health and all the other institutes that are part of that, but this would apply to Department of Defense studies or any other agency. And one of the benefits of this is that this will put TMI in a much better position to apply for grant funds from those agencies. And it's also true that the major foundations, philanthropic foundations, that we would want to approach to support our research, they require this sort of infrastructure, organizational structure, before they would even consider an application. So there is definitely going to be a benefit for TMI to do this extra step, to change the process from trying to get people to waive liability claims, to get them to be more active and respected, engaged subjects in accordance with the rules and the principles that are internationally recognized now as the right way to treat subjects.
Thank you.
Lee, did you?
That was the question I was trying to bring up, the benefit to TMI for the process.
Yeah. Yes, it really is what we need if we really want to move forward and seek grants to fund from the federal government and other institutions to do our research studies.
When we were chatting the other day, you were talking about hoping to solicit studies that focus on applications for
particular patient populations, and looking at particular clinical outcomes. Does the IRB need to be set up in such a way so that there are people with expertise in those particular clinical issues reviewing studies?
That's what we would do. We'll try to identify people, and I'll just help Scooter with it, and it'll be her responsibility to beat the people into submission to accept the responsibility. But we do want to have, we would want to have physicians, psychologists, clinicians, social workers, and so forth, who work with the kinds of populations that we're interested in serving. It's also possible to have ad hoc reviewers in special cases. One of the big concerns is, in normal IRB operation, would be working with vulnerable populations, they call them. So one of these is prisoners. And if you want to do research in any time with prisoners, then you actually have to have on your board someone from the prison who participates as a board member because they're providing the expertise. There's concern prisoners can be coerced, to be in your study by a pack of cigarettes or whatever it is that, is the currency in these days. So there can be some flexibility in membership, but the goal is to get a broad range of people in the study, including people who are not necessarily clinicians, but are in the community, and they represent the ordinary person and provide that representation. And let me just conclude by saying I modeled our proposal and the structure of ours on what other places like TMI have been doing. So I talked to the people at IONS, what do they do when they do their Dean Radin studies, and I talked to the people at the Rhine to see how they handle the protection of subjects in their studies. And I also worked with members of the Duke campus IRB, which is different from the medical center one that usually makes my life miserable. Medical research is obviously much stricter. The kinds of things that we are more likely to do don't require the same intensity of oversight. But again, part of this is we all get out of the habit of thinking about our subjects as equals. So for a place like TMI, where a guiding principle is that we're all one. We're all part of the same consciousness. We want to make sure that we're running our research studies in that way with respect for the individuals who help us by being in the studies. Okay? So let me just go ahead then. Where is TMI's research headed now? We haven't completed any studies this year, but I've been advancing in several different directions that I just want to describe for you. I set up 3 goals at the moment. The first goal is to establish that the programs we use actually affect free-running EEG activity. And we're all familiar with this image of synchronicity, hemispheric synchronicity, while people are listening to Hemi-Sync. And I've been trying to write a review article that we could publish in one of the journals that would review all the studies that show that it really works. And it was a surprise and somewhat of a disappointment to see how little research evidence we actually have. I mean, is there anyone here who doesn't accept that this happens while people listen to Hemi-Sync, or now while we're listening to Sam? I'm sure you all think that this is the case. But if I said, okay, go find a published study that shows it, you can't. Most of the work that Monroe liked to do here, and Skip did and so forth, they did to convince themselves of the validity of what they were doing, and did not worry about the outside world so much. So that leaves us in a position where if I try to get a grant, the reviewers will say, well, that just seems crazy, and I need to see some evidence that it does what you say it does. So I think we need to have a goal, and this would be something as simple as measuring EEG while people are listening to a specific SAM program using specific frequencies, or a Hemi-Sync program with specific frequencies that has a placebo control condition. So we can say, it's not the music, it's not the mood, it's not the set and setting, it's the actual signals that we love so much that's making the difference, and it's impacting EEG. I put in a pilot grant to do a study like this. And I'm going to continue to do that. The pilot grant I put in got a critique saying there's not enough evidence to show that Hemi-Sync affects EEG, which was my point. I gave them the ammunition they needed. I said, we don't really know enough about this, so we need to study it. And they said, we don't want to study it because we don't know enough about it. The second goal that I think would be useful and important is to demonstrate with rigorous studies, controlled studies, that the kind of rhythmic auditory stimulation that we use can elicit a relaxation response. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this relaxation response term. It was devised by Herb Benson, a cardiologist at Harvard, when he was doing research beginning in the early 70s on transcendental meditation. And at that time, it was reported that people who practiced transcendental meditation, repeating their mantra, that practice would elicit a relaxation response, which Benson defined as sort of an integrated set of physiological changes that was the opposite of the fight-flight response, which is elicited by threat and by stress. And it's curious that Benson was never able to see the same pattern twice in all the studies. And this is one of these things that everybody is sure is true, but again, it's a little ambiguous as to what it actually is made up of. But if we could take a program, say a new SAM program, that we listen to and we say, wow, this is relaxing, right? I feel so relaxed. And we get your classic college sophomores in a study, and half of them listen to that program, half of them listen to a placebo program with the same music or sounds, but no active program, no active tones. Then we say, okay, does the active program lower their heart rate, lower their blood pressure, slow their respiration, decrease their oxygen consumption, increase their skin temperature, decrease their skin conductance, all these things that the community in behavioral medicine believes are components of the relaxation response. So this would be the goal. Simple study, college students listen to one program or the other, and we measure their physiology. We could measure EEG too. But the point is, if we could show that just listening to a recording has exactly the same effects on physiology as learning mindfulness meditation, or for stress management, or learning transcendental meditation, or getting a cassette or CD with a relaxation program on it, and practicing this for 6-8 weeks, or going to a therapist for biofeedback relaxation training for 10 weeks. And we say all you have to do is listen, and you relax. Now, working with Bob, he was kind enough to send me something of the work that he's been using. And I listened to this with 40 years of experience in relaxing. And it's like, this was the most profound experience I've ever had of relaxation. So, of course, I said, wow, at the end of it, I'm like, I was so relaxed. And I said, that can't be true. So, of course, I listened to it a couple more times. Each time, I just felt, I just sit in a chair, listen, and I'm just so relaxed. So I gave it to my boss, who's the head of medical psychology, who has 45 years of experience teaching relaxation and stress management. And he got back to me and said, that is the most powerful relaxation experience I have ever had in my life. And he said, it reminded me of what I felt after 6 months of Jacobson's progressive relaxation, back in the 70s, the 60s and 70s. And it was just from listening. I mean, I do think that we have very powerful tools. And I've said before, and I'll just repeat, I think that we do well with consciousness exploration, and we can move in a slightly different direction towards clinical applications to help people manage symptoms like stress, like tension and anxiety, like sleeplessness, like pain, that are chronic problems for them. We can help them manage, and at the same time, they would be getting the benefits, possibly, of the kind of heart-mind expansion that we know come from the same programs. Now, if we had something like this, it could be implemented in hospitals, doctors' offices, dentist offices around the world, really. Image comes to my mind. My mother-in-law had cancer treatment. Many times she would come and have to wait 2 or 3 hours in the waiting room for her doctor's appointment for a checkup. And you could imagine how stressful that would be if you were a cancer patient who's waiting to get the results of follow-up tests. But if she could sit there and the person at the desk said, here, just put these headphones on, and you'll hear some nice music, and it might help you relax. How much better that would be for her, would have been for her, and for all the other patients in a similar situation. Anyone who's been an inpatient after a surgery, say you're lying there for a couple of days, CNN is on TV, but it's headline news, so it repeats every 15 minutes. And it's like there's nothing else to do and nothing to help you relax, which would help your healing. If we could find a way, if we could provide one of our programs to those patients, they would be better off in quality of their life while they're there, and they would probably heal faster too. So, I mean, there are so many ways that we could use relaxation programs. And that's why I choose to focus in the year ahead on establishing that we can produce a relaxation response the same as everybody else gets. But instead of taking 8 weeks, we can do it the first time you listen. So this is something I'm really excited about and I think has a lot of potential. Now, one of the problems I've run into is that to do these kinds of studies takes funding, which is currently in short supply. So I was thinking, as I was preparing to report to you, what can we do that doesn't take lots of money, that's within our current budget or would be free? What we really want to do is my third goal is to carry out those pilot studies that can confirm the critical foundations of our work but don't have much cost. So what can we do now, this week, this month, before the money comes in to carry out the fancy studies? Triumphantly, I woke up one morning with the message that we could use internet surveys to assess the effects of, say, SAM programs for limited costs. Do it all by internet survey. Now, we can use internet survey technology. There's a company called Qualtrics that has online surveys. You may have taken one, marketing survey, something like that. It's all in the cloud, and we could use those surveys to conduct studies. And my son actually had a job where they were running reaction time studies on the internet using a survey program and measuring in milliseconds, how long it takes to push a button when you get the cue. We could look at mood and arousal level. A lot of what we care about is related to mood and arousal, especially in the clinical applications. So what would this look like? I actually went ahead and wrote one of these things and then chopped out pieces to show you. So we could have the SAM appreciation study. This is just an example. You see they have beautiful backgrounds. This is what you'd see on your web browser. You see this page with this kind of colorful background, and it says, thank you for being in our survey. We appreciate your contributions. And then you can collect the background information on the subject. What's your age? If they're not old enough to be in the study, the survey program will kick them out gently and courteously, so they can't be in the study. And then your gender, how many programs have you had? If these were TMI familiar people, you could say, collect information. Do you have a daily practice in, meditation, relaxation, so on and so on and so forth, and people can check those boxes. So we know who's being in our study. We can present the instructions that we would give to someone to listen, to prepare them to listen to a SAM program. On the next page, you'll listen to the program. When you press play, you'll hear the recorded sounds. Be sure to, make sure you're seated comfortably, you have your headphones on, all those kinds of things. Then you go ahead, listen to the program with eyes closed, or however you want to do it, right? Then you have a screen like this, press the arrow to play. And what will happen, they would press this arrow, and then they would hear your program, your recorded program. And if you want, you can have a picture or slideshow up here, or you could have a video. And you can take the audio-visual package, and you could host it at TMI on the computers here. We can host it on YouTube in a private channel that only our subjects would be able to see. Or we can host it at this Qualtrics company. So they press the button, they listen to the 20, 30-minute program. Meanwhile, the survey is recording how long they listen. And it will tell you, did they listen to the whole thing? Or did they cheat and jump ahead? There'll be another next here. And then you go to your questions. Now that you've listened, please answer the following questions. And now, obviously, the content was just off the top of my head to illustrate what you could do. Here, use the sliders to describe your level of relaxation. So on your web browser, you take your mouse and click here and drag this slider over in response to the question, how relaxed did you feel during the recording from 0 to 100? How relaxed do you feel now? Then you move on. Or you can do things like this. Rate your experience with each of the moods, the following moods, from 1 to 5. Not at all to very much. Did you feel sleepy, tense, alert, clear-headed, relaxed, fuzzy, or confused? There are standard questionnaires we use in health psychology research that assess moods. One is called the Profile of Mood States. It has 30 adjectives that represent 6 categories of mood. And it's been used for decades, and everybody uses it, everybody believes it. So we could put that in. And people would, again, on the internet survey, would respond the way they would in your lab. And finally, we can have open-ended questions. Tell me how you felt during the program. Did anything happen that you feel would be interesting to report? They could write as much as they wanted, and you could analyze it qualitatively. I saw lots of flashing images. I started daydreaming. I heard birds chirping, whatever. And that way we can explore the actual experience of this program. Now, then at the end, it's very polite, thank you, and we could capture people's email addresses if they wanted to stay on the list and be enrolled in the next study. All of these things are done on the internet. It took me about an hour or so to create this demo survey. So it does not take much time, much effort. We can do it all. You don't have to have anybody come to your lab, come to your office to be in the study. You can recruit people for your studies lots of ways. You could do internet recruitment if you wanted every crazy person in the world. One thing we would like to think about is using the professional division mailing list. So we could send everybody here an email. We're doing these studies. Would you be willing to be involved and help us out? And you can decline, no big deal. But if you do it, you could be in that study, you could be in the next study, you could be in the next study. And what we could develop is an expert panel of people who help to develop the SAM technology that we're working on. And if we make arrangements, we could do these same kinds of studies with new Hemi-Sync programs, if we can work out the details of how to do it. The thing is, this is a flexible tool that any of you could use to run a study of the effects of a program to solve a question or answer a question that's interesting to you, whatever it would be. And once we get some experience with this approach, it's going to go very quickly to come up with a new survey. And I'm, sitting thinking, yes. Well, if we had enough of a mailing list, we could have 1,000 people do our study in a day. And the next day, we would know the results. We would know the effects of that program in this in people. Does it relax people? Do they say, wow, I'm really relaxed, or not? We could use this to contrast two different versions of a program. Does having birds and rippling creeks and things like that do better than having symphonic music? And I know that a lot of this work is done to develop new programs, but generally it's done one person at a time. Listening and reporting, listening and reporting. Well, we're doing it one person at a time in 1,000 different locations. And instead of having to wait weeks or months to know, we would know the next day. So I just think this was really cool, and whoever gave me the idea, wherever it came from, I am very grateful for it, because I think this is how I'm going to start with the basic idea while we will show whether we can find a program that produces intense relaxation just from listening. And if people report relaxation compared to control, we'll have a paper to publish. And with that paper, we'll have the evidence we need to get the money to do the physiology. And with the physiology, we'll have the money to do the EEG. And this will be able to snowball. And what matters the most to me is this not about me? Because this is about us and anyone who's interested in advancing the knowledge about what we do here and how it can be used to help people around the world. The same tools can be used by any one of you in your specific area of interest, no matter really what it is. And all we're doing is condensing and technologizing the kind of thing we would normally do one person a day. Okay? So this approach, I think, can take us to so many places. It is, in my thinking, my wife didn't like this image, but to me, this is the space shuttle that's taking us wherever we need to go. It's a technological solution for low-cost or no-cost studies that can answer the questions that are important to us. And it can answer all kinds of basic methodological questions. So I just want to conclude with this. This is a quote from Linus Pauling, The best way to have a good idea is to have lots of ideas. And this sounds like, but Linus Pauling is the only person in history to get 2 Nobel Prizes in totally different fields. He was a chemist, a physical chemist. You might have heard of him in association with vitamin C. He worked until his 90s on research, but he was the most important scientist of the 20th century in chemistry. And then he turned around and won the Nobel Prize for Peace as an anti-Vietnam War activist, an anti-war activist. So I figure it's worth listening or reading what he says and thinking about it. And it is true. To have good ideas, you have a lot of ideas, and he went on and said, you try them and you just set aside the bad ones. So what I want to end this with is just to say, I want to have your ideas of the questions that we can answer, either with the survey technology or later on with this. And I really want to be here to help everybody move this forward. Okay, so thank you. I guess we still have some time for questions.
Yeah, I just want to add something. I apologize. I was a little flummoxed when I came in from the Crystal, so I didn't say everything I wanted to say in your introduction. Jim has 40 years of background in this type of research that he is bringing to us, so we're so grateful for that. Already with me, in my 2 grand months here, he's been helping me to understand various research protocols, what we do, what we don't do. He's been very helpful with licensing procedures. He's been helpful with slowing us down and speeding us up in the appropriate places. So, Jim, my deep thanks to you for everything you've done for us already.
Yeah, and my joy in this, really, I love solving problems and figuring out how to do things. So this is a great place for doing that. Great opportunity for me.